say, well, such and such a candidate came from this region and he didn't win it. Well, Al Gore lost Tennessee. Big deal. It's very easy for people to lose the area that they come from if the opponent is popular. So the vote fraud scenario suffers from the fact that they don't have a poll, and the polls that they do have show Ahmadinejad shows the regime candidate winning by about 2-1, so about 2/3 of the votes for Ahmadinejad, and that's about what you have. So I think on the whole, this is not going to be very, very successful, and I think the really sinister thing again is if Musavi got in, what would he do? Let's look at Musavi for a minute.
This is the butcher of Beirut. This is one of the most hard-line Islamic fascists, to use the neocon terms. If anybody's an Islamic fascist, it's him. But always you see the globalists, the CIA, MI6, cozying up to these butchers.
Right, now,
he
now
represents the old line. He represents the old line, wealthy, corrupt that Ahmadinejad is fighting. I'm not saying Ahmadinejad's any angel, but this guy, actually you can tell by his actions, he really believes he's doing the right thing. You're right, he's popular with the people, but the little CIA-funded kids, the only way I see this working, but I want your take on this, so I'm interrupting Webster, because I want to hear what you have to say on this. And this is what Paul Craig Roberts and others are saying, and I agree with them. The only real reason they went with this is maybe it's going to work to overthrow them. It destabilizes them, period, and discredits them in the world's eyes if Israel goes ahead and blows their nuke reactors to kingdom come, that, oh, well, the regime deserved it. This is some type of, demonization campaign. Now, do you agree with that, or am I wrong?
Well, I think their maximum option was to try to overthrow the regime and put in a puppet state. The other thing, let me talk in a minute about the idea of busting up Iran, because that's their real strategy. Musavi, as you say, is this prime minister from the 1980s, and for me, the thing that sums it all up is during the Iran-Iraq war, started by the U.S., of course, in 1980, 1981, you had the mullahs, who are not good people, to say the least, going around and getting children. They would take children, fairly young children, away from their parents and get them to go to the front, and they would give them a stick or some little weapon that was really no weapon at all, maybe a knife or some silly little thing, and then send them up against the machine guns of the Iraqi army. So it was like a children's crusade. Now, Musavi was the prime minister who presided over human wave attacks by young children who had been taken away from their parents by these mullahs. So this is what he represents. And he, of course, is a tool of this guy, Rafsanjani. Rafsanjani is one of the most corrupt people in the world. Rafsanjani could compete with Zardari there in Pakistan in terms of corruption. Right? He's an extreme corrupt manifestation of the old regime. So Rafsanjani, who is the oldest, most discredited, most corrupt representative of this entire theocracy. That again, the theocracy was set up by Carter and Brzezinski during the Carter administration. Right? They installed Khomeini. That's what they wanted. They wanted Islamic fundamentalism as a bulwark against Soviet communism, and by God, they got it. So Rafsanjani is the spirit of Khomeini living on, and that's Musavi. So this is now, in the eyes of the U.S. and the British, this is now a wonderful reformer, and his wonderful supporters are these people that everybody should support. So I think this is probably going nowhere, and therefore that's a defeat for Obama, because remember, the argument for Obama was that this wonderful personality, this dazzling smile of Obama would transform the world through magical powers, right? Obama would gesture hypnotically, and the regime in Iran would fall. And again, the soft power people wanted the argument of saying, don't attack Iran, don't attack Iran. We can deal with Iran using these methods. Now, they have shaken the regime, but I don't know what's going to come out of it. I mean, it's Tiananmen was certainly it was more extreme than what we've seen here, and that did not work in China. So it looks like the color revolution, people power coup model is getting to be so well known that you can take measures against it, right? The Iranians have cut off Twitter and cut off parts of the internet and so forth. So I think they knew what was coming, and they were ready for it. Now, in terms of the long-term CIA stuff, The journalists today ignore the fact that Bush, in May of 2007, with great fanfare, Bush signed a $400 million program to subvert Iran using communications. There used to be fax machines, now it's Twitter, cell phones, internet.
And more importantly, that was done publicly for a color revolution. They said to get the students to try to overthrow the government, an act of war. And I want you to continue. But for folks that don't know, this is on record. We've written a bunch of articles at Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com previous to this latest big flare-up. They tried this actually back in 2004, the year after they'd taken over Iraq. There were some bombings and riots and things. And then they started, even before 2007, hiring 4 groups, and you always go over that, Webster, and then I want to move back to the current time and into the future, but you're really an expert on the 4 groups. One of them Kurdish, 3 of them connected in to Sunni Wahhabist, and number 3 in Al-Qaeda, working for CIA. But then also one of the groups that work for Saddam, they've got, so that's 5 groups, bombing mosques, blowing up school buses, shooting police, and Iran has sued the United States. The West admits they're staging attacks. Can you imagine if Iran was staging weekly attacks here for years? So it's not just 2007 with the shift from paramilitary attacks to getting the students ready for now what's happening. And then the facts of also how the mullahs can appoint who's going to run anyway. So why would they steal an election when they rig who gets to run anyway? So, I mean, it's just unbelievable. But how terrorists, including Al-Qaeda, openly work for the U.S. and England. And then they think our public is so stupid, Webster. They tell us Iran is Al-Qaeda when it's the opposite a religious group of Islam. I mean, this is like saying Superman is Lex Luthor.
Yeah, the U.S. Congress, of course, has repeatedly passed regime change laws concerning Iran. In other words, a flagrant interference in the internal affairs of a sovereign state. Now, remember, Seymour Hersh of The New Yorker has been writing articles since, 2004, 2005, saying the U.S. has special forces teams, terrorist controllers, saboteurs, political operatives on the ground in Iran, and they do. We have Brent Scowcroft, a gray eminence of the ruling elite, has given an interview quite recently which says, of course, we have all kinds of CIA personnel on the ground. And that gets us into then I think that the reasonable scenario for Iran is if you had Mousavi take over, that would leave Mousavi as the prime minister of what they call Iranistan. Iranistan would be sort of the central part of Iran, Tehran and Qom and some other large cities. But then, as you mentioned now, the CIA and the British, MI6 especially, they have these other groups, right? You have the Jundullah terrorists operating in Baluchistan. That would be southeast Iran, coming in sometimes from Pakistan. They have terrorists coming from Afghanistan into the area in the northeast. That would be Pashtunistan. That would be another component. Then they have, in the north, they have Azeris, they have Kurds, and then they have this Arabistan. This is where the British have invested a lot. Arabistan, or Akvaz, is the coast of Iran along the Persian Gulf or Arabian Gulf, the Gulf, I guess. And that's the area of the Abadan refinery, the Karg Island tanker terminal, the oil fields, sort of south of a chain of mountains. And here, for a long time, the British have sponsored what I call the BP Liberation Front, British Petroleum Liberation Front, because it's an open attempt to detach from Greater Iran the parts that the British used to control and used to be their main source of oil.
They want to slice the big port. They want to slice the big port and oil field away, so Iran has trouble.
Right. And then you mentioned the MEK, right? The Mujahideen-e-Khalq is an army with tanks, with all kinds of weapons that the U.S. has and continues to protect inside an enclave on the Iraqi side. But these people can be sent over. So if you add up Al-Qaeda in that Pashtunistan area, you've got Jundullah in the Baluchistan area, you got Mujahideen-e-Khalq, you've got this Akvaz Liberation Front, you've got 4 or 5 different terrorist groups that are being fomented by the U.S. and the British. And the background to the entire thing, they say, if you turn on CNN, they say, well, the economy under Ahmadinejad is bad. Yeah, there are sanctions. There are draconian economic sanctions, practically a blockade. I don't know why Ahmadinejad doesn't get up there like Castro and say, comrades, or, brothers in Islam, our economy is bad because we're under economic blockade. And I suppose he does say that. But that is one of the realities. Now, Ahmadinejad is, of course, a populist demagogue with a lot of bluster. But in terms of an election, it really looks like he won it. So
yeah, certainly. We have U.S. poll companies saying 2-1. And then the other clown announces he's won hours before the polls close to create the perception of a stolen election when he loses. Webster, do you think he knows he's working for the CIA, or do they want to put him in?
I think he's probably a winning actor.
All right, stay there. We'll come back and get into other areas of the world.